A Harvard law professor and political scientist from San Francisco State University recently penned an egregiously dangerous and absurd letter urging President Biden to disregard the Supreme Court's rulings and guess what? Supplant them with their own. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Did they not simply make this ridiculous ask without justification? They used a widely discredited interpretation of the Constitution called popular constitutionalism, which posits that the Supreme Court has no exclusive authority over the meaning of the Constitution. So Biden can simply up his own interpretation and give that one force, a mighty force indeed. This is not only a dangerous, democracy-threatening idea, patriots, but it's also plain dumb. What would these professors say when one day a Republican president is in power and there is a liberal court? These insane ideas for circumventing the power of the Supreme Court are obviously short-term solutions that will always backfire in the long run. Well, the executive branch does not have the authority to interpret the Constitution. That's why we have, what, 3 branches of government: legislative, judicial, and executive. Somebody needs to put the actual partisan politicians in check. But these supposed professors apparently seem to have forgotten first-grade civics. Let me welcome Senior Fellow of the Independence Women's Forum, Carrie Sheffield, to the broadcast. Carrie, your thoughts on what is just becoming more and more ridiculous?
Well, I'm reminded of an excellent quote by Thomas Sowell, which is, "The road to hell is paved with Ivy League degrees." And I say this as a Harvard grad myself, that so often Harvard is a place where there's a lot of knowledge, but not a lot of wisdom. And this really seems like a crackpot legal theory, I'll be honest, to say that you can just disregard the Constitution of the United States that outlines the 3 branches of government. I think it's fundamentally illegal and maybe even treasonous. So I think this professor should be stripped of his or his job, or at the very least censured and called in, but it's Harvard, so I'm not going to hold my breath.
You know, country music star Jason Aldean is in the news over his song, "Try That in a Small Town." He's being accused of racism. Is this true, or is this just an example of wokeness going way too far, Carrie?
Well, the reality is that our most dangerous places to be an African American, the most crime-ridden, the most, just areas where there's less opportunity for African Americans, where students are trapped, where poor Black students are trapped in failing schools. Those are all run by progressives and Democrats. So I don't believe anything when they're trying to cancel this singer. I don't believe them. The facts tell a completely different story. And what he's trying to convey through his song is that the values of small town America, of faith, family, community as the bedrock of this country, those are the eternal truths that cannot be torn down. That's what he's singing about. And he wants to export that back to our inner cities, back to places like San Francisco that's covered in feces and drug needles. That's not the values of small town America. And that's not the values of America. That's not what America used to be about. Unfortunately, the big cities have been taken over by forces who want to make us more like Europe, to make us more like socialism, to bring in these false ideologies that is only going to bring death and destruction.
Now, I got to tell you, I'm going to challenge you. I was just in San Francisco for the last few days for the 26.2-mile marathon. And had I not gone to San Francisco, I would have echoed what you said about the needles and the homelessness. But I must tell you, San Francisco has quietly cleaned up its mess. You have to look far and wide to find the homelessness. You have to look far and wide to find the needles, the eyesores that I saw when I was there less than a year and 4 months ago. And, you know, when I started asking questions, and I must have walked the neighborhood for miles and miles and miles, and they said they've quietly started the process of cleaning this up, that this homelessness, what they tried as an experiment is no longer working, and they've turned back the clock. So I must tell you, we cannot include San Francisco in that conversation any longer. They've gotten the message. And also, you also mentioned liberals and the impoverished cities. You think the only cities where what you consider to be minorities are disenfranchised are in Democratic-run cities?
But I think other places as well. But I'm saying the preponderance of evidence. When you look at the areas that are most per capita crime-ridden, they are the bluest areas. The people who are more likely to be in prison are more likely to be Democrat voters. So, and as to San Francisco, maybe you were running. I have no doubt that they put the marathon route in a nice, safe route.
No. Let me stop.
There's probably a reason why they did that.
Let me stop you again, because everything to me is about integrity and honor. I actually spent 3 days in San Francisco before being part of the marathon. So this is something I was doing in my role as a broadcaster, because I went there to report all the bad news about San Francisco. That was my agenda. But let me tell you, I was pleasantly shocked it was not there. They've done a fantastic job. And the Bible tells us when someone does good, when you find credit, gives them credit. And I must give them credit. They've cleaned their act up. But
hey, Armstrong, you know I like good news. So if that's what you're reporting the good news. I'm not going to stop
I'm reporting the truth. I'm just telling you the truth. But here's what I want to talk about. Okay. I've spent with my brother, who's a state senator in South Carolina, we spent some time in South Korea, and we had an opportunity to visit the DMZ years ago, a very cold place. And at the time we were there, it did not have the fence, but you knew where the line of demarcation was. You knew where not to cross the Rubicon. You knew exactly where that Rubicon was. And here we are, Travis King, whose assignment was to parole the DMV. He knew very well what the consequences were and what was at stake. Obviously, he was involved in an altercation in a South Korean bar, and he was arrested. And let me tell you something, the rules in South Korea are very loose for Americans, and especially for our military, but they put him in detention for 46 days. Once he was released, took him to the airport with an escort. Because he has served his due diligence, the escort could not go through security clearance with him, disappeared for 12 hours. It wasn't until the aircraft landed in the United States that he realized that he had disappeared. But he got on a tour bus. He bought the tour tickets, and I can't even understand why you would even be given tours at the DMZ zone in the first place. It's so dangerous. But they said that when he got to the place, he went zooming across the border. Now, there are mental issues going on here. Obviously, the military is not telling us anything else, but I remember Otto, the young kid who was in his hotel room, pulled the protest poster off his wall. It was on camera. They locked him up. They actually shrunk his brain while he was alive, Carrie, sent him back home, and he died. We have not known what cruelty really is until we watch what North Korea, what they do to what people they perceive as the enemy. And as paranoid as they are, they probably suspected this guy was in his right mind. He was a spy. This is why they've not spoken out anything about him yet. What are Americans? There's really nothing to exchange him for. Do you feel empathy for him, or is he just a dead man walking?
I mean, they might be trying to use him as some type of bargaining chip, you know, because the North Koreans are always trying to get leverage. So that might be kind of the game, the cat and mouse game they're trying to play to maybe get some type of concession or some other type of prisoner, maybe some type of exchange like we saw with the basketball player. I had an experience at the DMZ as well when I was in graduate school. I was a Harvard student, and we actually got a tour during our spring break. A small group of us went, and we went on one of those tours, and we went to the same area. And I crossed over the border into the negotiating table. It is a very solemn place. And the fact that this individual just kind of saw it as a game is really unfortunate. It's clear he wasn't briefed to understand the severity of what was going on. I must admit I had a little bit of a situation because I actually took off my coat because they were doing a big group picture and I was wearing this puffy coat. And I was like, I don't want this coat in the picture. So I put it on the table and they're like, take that off the table. That is on the north side. And I was like, okay, I will remove it off the table. So I am glad that nothing happened to me at 26 years old when I was on the North Korean side.
But, but Travis made it clear that he was not coming back to the United States to face the music. I think what he did not realize, the music would have been much softer and easier for him coming back home than what he's going to face in North Korea. Let me turn our attention to Donald Trump. Is Donald Trump running for president, or is he running to amass a legal defense fund to pay for his legal fees? Isn't there something that's just so unethical and so un-American about this?
Well, I don't speak for him, but I think he would argue that the reason why he keeps getting the legal attacks is because he's running for president. And that it's not just him, that when you see, it was the same thing with Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Ben Carson was venerated in the press. He was an icon. And as soon as he changes and says, I'm going into politics and I'm a Republican, then the knives come out. And that certainly was
but
the case.
no one has ever accused Dr. Carson of being a pathological liar, of being narcissistic, or it's all about them. I mean, you can criticize Dr. Carson on his politics, but no one ever really criticizes his character, his integrity, and his honor, and they do believe he loves America, not in love with himself.
Well, I think that about Dr. Carson, but I know that people attack him for his religion. They say he's a religious zealot, that he's a nut job. I don't think that, but they certainly didn't do that until he became a Republican. And it's the same thing with other Republicans. As soon as they come out as a Republican, then the knives come out, and they come to Mitt Romney.
I don't want to make this about Republicans, because the issue for me is Donald Trump. And this is a question that I ask. Does Donald Trump bear any responsibility in these attacks on him?
I think he does go too far sometimes. I think, like, for January 6th, I agree with what Vivek Ramaswamy said, which was that he should have been more forceful in condemning what was happening with the riots. He should have been more proactive in telling them to stop. He should have. He also should have been more proactive in the conversations about the classified documents. I think he does things that are kind of unforced errors. But the question is whether he does things that are criminal in nature, and also whether there's a two-tiered system of justice. I think that there is
anything in his behavior that is criminal in nature, in your opinion?
Well, I think the problem is that the reason why a lot of people circle the wagons for him is that there is absolutely a two-tiered system of justice.
We agree with that. We agree. But you know what? I'm gonna move away from Trump, because I've got to come back to my conversation about AI. But I must raise this with you before we say goodbye, because I'm always appreciative of your coming on. They're really attacking Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We're going to be sitting down with him next week for a one-on-one, 1-hour interview. Why is it that the left are so afraid of RFK Jr.? Why are they doing everything they can to pounce on him, that the nerve of him to challenge the sitting president, who's also a Democrat?
It really does show you that the establishment will do anything at all costs to avoid any sort of debate, and that's unfortunate. And to see JFK's cousin or grandson, who's RFK's cousin, to go after him, I thought was very disappointing. And the way he invoked his grandfather, I was like, go look at your grandfather's policies. I believe if JFK was alive today, he'd actually be a Republican. If you look at his tax policy, he was the one who coined the phrase that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think that RFK Jr. is actually carrying the torch far better for JFK than his grandson.
Well, I will say this. Listen, I have family members who are Democrats. I always agree with them. But I would never attack my family member for the sake of political gain or for politics. I may challenge them and say I may disagree with you, but to call them an embarrassment, that's just crossed the lines. There's just some things I don't cross the line of. Because, listen, family will always be family. I don't care what time of day it is. They will always be your loved ones. And I think that is something very sacred. Listen, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us for Your Voice, Your Future. And when we return, artificial intelligence is on the menu. I'm Armstrong Williams. It is Your Voice, Your Future, and we'll be back. artificial intelligence, and we've got an all-star lineup. Billy Carson, CEO of Forbidden Knowledge TV, is joining us. Tiffany Norwood, founder and CEO of Tibetan and co-founder of Hassan Will Win Sport. And new to our platform, Dr. Hassan Tetteh, best-selling author of The Art of Human Care with Artificial Intelligence. We welcome you all to the broadcast. Dr. Tetteh, how will artificial intelligence make physicians smarter?
That's an excellent question. It'll help us give information to our patients in a more efficient and a more available way. What I mean by that, I'll tell you a little story. When I started to do my work in artificial intelligence, I have a background as a cardiac surgeon. We take data, we take technology, we synthesize that to help our patients. I was presented with a case one time. It was a gentleman who was not old, in his mid-40s. He had a family history of heart disease, perfect condition in terms of his health, his fitness, and he had chest pain. And I thought to myself, in this vast body of information that we have, all of the research over all these decades, there probably is something that this gentleman has that has probably been described in the literature. Voluminous amounts of research is published every day. And we just, as physicians, can't synthesize all of that. But if you have an opportunity and a way to synthesize that information to get insight so that you can treat your patients better, that is one of the ways that it can make us smarter and make us more efficient, make us better equipped to take care of our patients. Artificial intelligence should be looked at, Armstrong, as a tool to help the providers do their work better. And that's where it is.
But at what price to the patient?
At what price to the patient?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question. I think the context of that question needs to be sort of looked at over the expanse of history and where technology has been applied to help patients. All technology, when it's introduced into patient care, has to be done in a very deliberate, very responsible, and a very ethical way. The stethoscope, for example, when it was first introduced, many people thought it was a heretic item. But it turns out that over time, and after research and after validation, we found that it actually helped us to diagnose heart conditions better and assess a patient's heart function. Before the stethoscope, people used to just put their ear to the chest and listen. Not very effective, not as good as the stethoscope. That's just one example. But if you think about how artificial intelligence has been applied now, we're helping patients by enhancing diagnostics. Artificial intelligence is being used to better diagnose radiologic films, pathologic slides. This can help patients have detection of cancers and ailments and pathology faster and sooner so they get the care that they need and deserve.
So you trust AI with this, in the long term, with this art of human medicine?
I think it is an adjunct and a tool to be used in addition to all of the very central themes that have always underpinned good and effective healthcare. Listening to the patient, caring for the patient, being responsible about the kind of care that you're going to deliver to the patient, personalizing the care, and working in a partnership with the patient to deliver the best treatment for that patient at the right time for when the patient needs it.
Billy Carson, for those
Yes, sir.
that have this wonderment about artificial intelligence, you know, sometimes people fake that they understand what it means and what it is, and so they don't embarrass themselves. They pretend they know exactly what the conversation is about. Why don't you break down for us and our audience exactly what artificial intelligence is today, what it was yesterday, and what it means for our future?
Yes, definitely. Artificial intelligence has been developed over the last 30 years. It's not something that's totally brand new. There's been various forms of it from decades ago. In the past, it was extremely rudimentary, just basically able to answer very, very simple questions. And even at that time, the human brain was still computational, much more powerful. Now, fast forward to the current era where we are right now, you find that it has grown in magnitudes. And what they did with this AI when they began to develop at this higher level, they began to utilize it on the general population without them knowing about it, to be quite honest with you, in order to gather data and to train the AI. So the AI has been getting trained. A lot of these apps and programs and software programs that you've been accessing and utilizing over the last 5 to 8 years have actually had very, very small print that you're allowing this AI technology, your data, to be sent to this AI technology so that it can learn. So it's been learning off of the human populace for close to a decade now. And so what AI is, it's a culmination of this quantum computing type of technology that allows it to be able to process, access database, interpolate information, extract data, and also come up with its own hypothesis without any human interaction. And it can actually even make decisions. It can kick out answers. So AI that's where it is right now, but it still has a lot of errors right now. There's still a lot of things they're working on. As a matter of fact, I did a podcast the other day where I was asking live on my video, AI some questions, and it couldn't answer those particular questions. So there's a lot more learning and growing for it to do. In the future, though, you're looking, far in the future, maybe another 10 years, you're talking about this thing literally being imbued in every single electronic device that we have, smart homes, TVs, whatever our mobile apparatus will look like at the time, cars and everything else, will all, even airplanes will all be driven off of this AI technology. The question is, we have to set up parameters to keep control over it and not let it control us.
Now, you said something that's insightful, that you asked AI questions. Not only could they not answer, but they got the answers wrong. I just read where when AI first started out, the math questions that were programmed to be answered, they could answer almost 80 to 90% of those questions. As of recent, within the last week, it has only been able to answer 20% of those questions to get those answers right. What does that tell you?
It's learning the wrong information from us. It's starting to go backwards, so to speak. And so I saw that same article, as a matter of fact. I had asked you a simple question about the word the matrix in the Bible. How many times did the word matrix appear in the Bible? And it said the matrix is not in the Bible whatsoever, but it appears in the Bible in 5 different verses. So clearly it didn't have access to that data or couldn't figure it out or didn't know. But again, mathematically, so what's happening is here, we see that it had this huge surge up front, but now so many people are utilizing it. It could be that it could be getting confused. I mean, it is operating on a certain level of consciousness, not the same as a human being, but there is a certain level of conscious intent behind it. And it could be also, another option is that the people that are programming the AI have tuned it back a little bit for whatever reason. We have no idea what that agenda is, but it could be that they've kind of are playing and tinkering with the software in real time, and we're seeing the effect of that during this process of it learning how to grow and answer and overcome issues and problems that it's having, glitches and so forth. So it's this process of, could it be a lot of the input going in that's wrong, and it's learning from it, or that they're tinkering? It could be a combination of both.
Tiffany, you are a serial entrepreneur. You've raised almost $1 billion early on in your life when you were 20, almost $670 million. You've created opportunities and jobs all over the world. One of the concerns I hear about AI is in the world of the workforce and employment. What jobs will AI replace? Well, AI has already started replacing jobs because, as Billy Carson said, it has been here. All of a sudden, it has made himself known. I am here, and I'm here to stay, and I may be coming after your place of employment. Talk about AI and the workforce.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And I think, one, I would like to address people's general fear of AI, right? So before we even get to the workforce, there's this general fear of artificial intelligence, and I think partly because it's named wrong. It's more human-derived intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So there are humans behind all this. Billy touched upon it with the human trainers. But if you look at technology that we are comfortable with, like our smartphones, how often do you have to update your smartphones, right? It's much less complex than the AI and large language models that we're talking about. And still, the Apple operating system, since it was released in 2006, has had like 16 updates. We're on iOS 16. And iOS 16 was released last September, and we're at 16.6. So that's how often these, the technology needs to be updated. And so first off, I want to say, don't be afraid of AI. AI is not death of humanity. You need to, the software needs to be babysitted. The models need to be trained. The servers, the electricity, all of that. We're a long way away from death of humanity with AI, if that would ever be the case. I think that's more fantasy. With regards to the future and workforce and replacement, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Armstrong, but I am...
Before you get to that, before you get into the workforce, all of our guests are coming back. Billy Carson, Dr. Hassan, Tiffany, don't go away. I don't want to interrupt what you have to say. We've got to go to a break. It's Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. I'm Armstrong Williams. Don't go away. Carson, Hassan, and Norwood are back. Let's continue.
Okay, so I was sharing some news. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I got accepted to Cornell's College of Engineering, Masters of Engineering program, Systems Engineering, which is, thank you, which is artificial intelligence. So I'm going to be focused on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain as I go through this degree. And so I've spent a lot of time really looking at artificial intelligence for good and the impact that can have in the world and the workforce. I think that we're already seeing a lot of the disruption in the workforce, and the sort of jobs that it's replacing are the sort of jobs that are more repetitive, that are very data-oriented, and don't require a lot of creativity. So one of the good, so for example, you'll see things around, say like in the finance industry, a lot of compliance stuff is handled by artificial intelligence now. So the know your customer rules that exist to make sure that there's your customers aren't money launderers, for example, you'll see a lot of that where it's data-driven, predictive modeling to sort of say, this is the profile of a money launderer, this person is behaving like that, flag it. But a lot of the jobs around creativity, so for example, I'm in the innovation space, jobs where you need new ideas, where you need to collaborate and problem solve. Things like, for example, in medicine, when you're doing the diagnostic, right, and Dr. Tetteh can speak to this better, when you're doing the diagnostic and having the initial results presented, AI can be great for that. But you don't want those results to go directly to the patient. You need people in the middle, the technicians, the doctors, to put their creativity and their the art, so to speak, in it, where they're also looking at making intuitive connections and drawing upon their experience that could be anchored more in the real world with real human beings, whereas AI is deriving this sort of mathematical human that might not actually exist in the real world. I think human creativity will always surpass machine creativity or intelligence dealing with technology a lot. we don't realize how much humans are involved in every step of the way of technology. We're sort of seeing this a bit with Twitter, right? Where you've gone from 7,000 to 2,000 employees, and I think they're even cutting more employees. And if you've used Twitter along the way, you also notice that there's a lot more outages. The tech has imploded a few times already, whereas when you had all of those humans watching out for it, that type of stuff happened, but you didn't notice it before. So I think what we'll find with artificial intelligence is that hopefully there'll be more collaborative intelligence involved, where artificial intelligence is bringing out the best of humans. With that said, for the sort of roles that are repetitive and predictive, like compliance, where people will lose their jobs, I think we have to be very proactive in retraining the workforce, as well as paying people to go back to school, et cetera. I feel we've waited too long already anyway, because we're up against it now, especially when ChatGPT was released in November 30th of last year. But it's not too late. It's actually something where we can use AI to help train the future workforce, and we can use each other. And I'll give you one little example with that. I'd written a piece called The Education of You and Me about 7 years ago around AI, where you could leverage, say, for example, me. I'd go into this system, fill out a form, and say, I live here, I have experience in AI and tech and da-da-da and blah, blah, blah. I'm also interested in human psychology, et cetera, et cetera. And the AI could match citizens with each other, and maybe you meet up at a library, and I teach someone about AI, and that person might teach me about human psychology. So that instead of making everything about going back to school or this hierarchical structure of school, it's peer-to-peer, almost like an Uber or a Lyft, where we're sharing our intelligence and knowledge with each other. And I feel if we did that, it wouldn't be as daunting to people that who are seeing their jobs disappear because of AI. And also, it won't be as daunting for them to start, like that could be the initial few steps. And then after they've been speaking to their neighbor, or fellow citizens about it, they might then decide, oh, let me go into a training program.
So, Dr. Hassan, I read a quote from you, the importance of health and wellness. Scientists get to do what they do and do it well and over a long-term period of time because of health. Lawyers, caregivers, any sector of society gets to do what they do over a long period of time because they take care of their health. And when I was listening to Billy and listening to Tiffany, I thought about how you sort of develop and deploy this AI ethically, because we've already reading reports where AI is overriding, even when it's programmed. I mean, you could be in the hospital and you say, let's administer this. AI can say no. They can How do you control this concern about AI? And once you override, you have to figure out how to go back and level that off before damage, or somebody may end up dying or severely harmed. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a great question. I think, to perhaps accentuate and underscore some of the things that Billy and Tiffany have already spoke about, it is, Billy, I think, mentioned it well in terms of how is AI defined. It's defined differently by so many people. Each one of us now has a different definition, so to speak, of what AI is. To answer your question specifically about how it's being implemented in the hospital and what harm it could cause or not cause, is to understand fundamentally that right now, that is not necessarily the case in the hospital. There is not a omniscient force that's being implemented and applied in patient care. There are definitely tools being developed that are helping us in both the diagnostic and in the therapeutics for healthcare and how we take care of patients. But there is not a computer that's out there just running rogue in the hospitals that's doing things to patients. I think that needs to be sort of level set and clear. But what I would like to do is give you two examples, one in a microscopic and sort of personal way, and some in a macroscopic and a population health way of showing you how effective AI has been in helping individuals. And I've published about this with my colleagues. So on a microscopic level, because of the digitization of pathology slides, because of the massive computing power that we now have, and because of the data that we've been fortunate enough to gather over all this time, we're able to train models and use computer vision and an interface to help us diagnose certain cancers. And we've actually helped to bring this technology, this very valuable tool, to the bedside. So imagine looking into a microscope and having an interface that allows a circle to be driven or drawn around a tissue that looks suspect. Now the pathologist can hone in on that, and that can now be the basis of an early diagnosis, that now that information can be used to help treat the patient more effectively and earlier.
And sort of reduce being misdiagnosed.
Correct. And increase the efficiency of that pathologist, because now the pathologist can actually look at more slides over time and actually have the augmenting and the help of this tool. So that's one example in the microscopic level, right? And for the personalized. But now take it macroscopic. During the pandemic, we learned a lot. Telemedicine, telehealth has exploded, obviously, and that's here to stay. That's a good thing. There are components of that are going to be augmented and enhanced with AI. But I want to speak specifically about another platform that, with the tools of AI, our colleagues helped, and we published about this as well. So during the pandemic, you can remember, in the very early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of information that we did not know. How could we track where COVID was going to be presenting itself in populations? There wasn't an ICD-9 or ICD-10 code for that. That wasn't even in existence. But we did know patients were coming to the ER with flu-like symptoms. We extrapolated claims data to be able to build a model so that we can, in the early stages, this is early 2020, figure out that there were certain places down to the zip code level where there were outbreaks of populations that were coming into the hospital with what appeared to be flu-like symptoms that were likely COVID. Now, with that information, as we started to develop and mature the models, we were able to say, hey, we can now deploy resources to certain zip codes, to certain places. We could start to have this information help us with getting the essential care and needs and help that these patients need down to a very specific area. That would not have been possible had it not been for the process of really doing a very robust data analysis on a disparate amount of information. Now, you think about how you can take that to the next stage. You can couple that with different factors, social determinants of health. This can now start to help us as care providers, as public health officers, start to understand and appreciate how we can better take care of our populations. So I think Tiffany has underscored something. I think there is, and she and I had an opportunity to be on another panel and have a platform where we are able to field questions. And one of the things I ask before folks ask questions is, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist, or are you undecided about AI? And the optimists, were very excited, exuberant about it. The pessimists, very, anxious, understandably. And then there were a lot of people that were quite frankly indifferent, because I think the understanding of what's happening is still limited.
This is Your Voice, Your Future. What a deep, provocative, insightful conversation. I'm Armstrong Williams. We'll be back. So let me just cut to the chase about what should scare all of us about AI. And I know Billy Carson and others will correct me if they think that I'm paranoid, especially when you think about AI-powered surveillance systems, data and security. They can create voices, they can create images, they can almost create your handwriting, they can create you. And by the time they get to the truth, your life could be just destroyed, okay? That's just a fact. So it frightens me, the power of what AI can do in that area, Billy Carson. Give us some comfort.
Yeah. Now, I'm an optimist about AI. However, there are a lot of things we have to consider if we're going to make this a part of our everyday life going forward. We really need to put some heavy parameters in place, and then there needs to be some oversight on this AI software, congressional oversight. There need to be committees in place. There should be training in place as well. Before anyone even had access to use ChatGPT, for example, they should have been forced to take a tutorial and some type of a very short, maybe 20-minute course on it, just so they can understand exactly what it is and how it operates, so they can know exactly how to utilize it and what to expect from it. So many people jumped right on it and started using it to replace their work wherever they worked at, wherever their employment was, and they ended up getting fired because they were using ChatGPT, and unfortunately in some cases it didn't give out the right answers, or they were told not to use that and they used it anyway, and they were able to check and find out you can't even use it to pass college exams, high school, and so forth. So there's a lot of parameters and things that need to be put in place as this thing continues to grow and become part of our society. And we also have to realize that it's replacing a lot of jobs, as Ms. Norwood said, of mundane jobs, things that don't require too much creativity. However, unfortunately, those are the people that are the backbone of the United States. That's the backbone of generating income that goes back into the economy. That's just life. That's just the way it is. And those people now are looking at having their jobs replaced. But the problem is we're not taking away their bills. They still have the same car payment, rent payment, mortgage payment, medical bills, and everything else that everyone else has. But now they have no income, and a lot of them don't have the capability of upgrading what they're currently doing. And it just is what it is. Some people are not meant to be higher than where they're at. And so the thing about it is we have to decide how are we going to move forward as a civilization on this planet, incorporating AI into our civilization and creating it that it will take away the burden of mankind so that it frees up mankind to be creative and explore and work if they so choose in that particular industry. How do we then, like Ms. Norwood say, train people who do have the capability of upgrading themselves and their knowledge and have a passion for that particular field to get into that and learn more about it? And so we have to really consider a lot of different things when it comes to this. Of course, like you say, and it's tied into all the data, and it's tied into very, very secure and secreted information. At some point, we need to make sure there are parameters, because this thing can literally, at some point in the future, it will be able to hack into things, unlock codes. It can create locks and hacks, or it can create quantum entangled information that nobody can even get back into. So once it locks out an agency, they can't get back in. So there's all kind of things that it can do, but we have to be like, okay, since it can do these things, and we know that that's the path that it's going on, what do we do to fix this problem? I personally feel that we need people like Ms. Norwood working on the inside of this software, where people who are helping to program and code this that are conscious, people who have an understanding of what humanity actually is, because anything that man makes is going to take on the consciousness of the actual person that created it. And if you have people that are working there that are not conscious, in other words, if they don't have mankind first in mind, they're just looking to be a programmer and let this thing run on its own, kind of like a wild, wild west in the digital world, we're going to have a problem. But if we can get people consciously helping to guide this thing and create parameters that are greatly needed, and training that is greatly needed, and let people know, like, hey, you can't utilize this for an end-all, be-all. It takes this along with human intelligence. It's just a tool that you can actually use to make your job a little bit easier, but don't replace it 100%. And if we do that, we should be okay. But we always still have to keep one eye open at night to make sure that the powers that be at the highest levels don't turn this thing into a weapon, because the main thing they love to do is weaponize anything they can get their hands on.
You know, it is so true, and we have not even discussed AI on the battlefield and the war theater. And there will always be people with warped minds and represents the worst of evil that mankind can encompass. So, you know, what I want to do is something a little different as we wrap up in our last 8 minutes. I want you to talk about what you feel you need to talk about that I, as a moderator, have not asked, that you think should be discussed on this platform before we say goodbye to this riveting discussion. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Hassan.
That's a great question, Armstrong. So that is an opportunity for me to share something with you, which I think will hopefully give some comfort to you specifically, your viewers as well, and also put things in context of where we are. Many have likened AI to the new electricity. If you think back to some of these historic times where we were at the precipice of something monumental, seismic changing that was going to fundamentally change the lives of everyone, right? Going from gas lights, candles, to electricity. You know, what would we do without electricity now? AI can be looked at in that same context. And I will quote something that a journalist wrote when they were talking about the dawn of the computer age and what that meant to society. And this was how I would frame it. AI will change and impact everything, except for the things that matter most. The rest is up to us. All of our technologies, no matter how intrusive they are in our lives, fundamentally, at the end of the day, as humans, we still rely on taking care of our family. You mentioned that. Taking care of our health. Thinking about our fellow brothers and sisters, those of us that do have that tendency. So no matter what is happening, think of that in that context. AI will impact everything, except for the things that matter most. The rest is up to us.
Ms. Norwood?
I think that's a great sentiment, and it is the truth, right? That everything that matters is focused, is human-centered, as Dr. Tetteh would say, and AI can never touch that. I'm going to use my last few minutes to sort of expand on what Mr. Carson was talking about as far as the people behind the AI, because it is so important. As Dr. Tetteh said, it's going to touch every part of our society and already has. I mean, I started learning to code in the 70s and 80s, and by 1992, I'd licensed my first software, which was AI driven back then. So way longer than 30 years it's been building up. I'll say in the past, you would have people that took their art form seriously. So, you know, we studied engineering in school. We understood the ethics and the trade-offs. No, not much different, but different than going to med school and becoming a doctor. A lot of us could just from practice learn how to be a doctor. I joke sometimes that I'm practically an endocrinologist with a specialty in thyroid disease because I had my thyroid removed 23 years ago and had to hack it, right? But even with all that study and all that application and being successful in how I handled having my thyroid removed and thyroid disease, if I went out and practiced medicine, I would get arrested. It's considered a serious, it's considered a very serious career and art form and science form, and you have to go through years and years and years of study as well as residency, et cetera. Dr. Tetteh can tell us how long that is, but it's in the double digits, right? And yet these fellow technologists, because I'm also a technologist and engineer, come out, they start these companies that will impact society in large-scale ways, including our democracy. I mean, Barack Obama was the first social media president. We're about to see the first AI president, right? Like the sort of president that AI can get elected. So it's affecting every aspect of our society, and yet these mainly guys come out. We'll look at a Sam Altman, right? he got accepted to Stanford, dropped out after a year, and now he has all this responsibility. And people will talk about unintended consequences and trade-offs. We need to have these leaders, tech leaders, be more qualified and more accountable. Right now, they're mainly accountable to venture capitalists.
You know, it's so wonderful sitting among God's gifts, geniuses, and lights. I've learned so much. You know, in everybody's life, we need to learn and grow, and that's been this moment. Thank you all so much for giving your time, your genius to this program. And I'm Armstrong Williams. Thank you for joining us.